They called her Hollow, a girl born without a wolf in a kingdom where that flaw meant death. But Kaia Thorne didn't come to the claiming hall to beg for mercy. She came because her father's greed had already sealed her fate. Dragged in silver chains before a monster of a king known for breaking his wives, she should have died that night. Instead, something worse happened. The king's nephew, a prince colder than winter itself, claimed her. And in that single moment, beneath the eyes of a bloodthirsty court, two cursed souls collided, and the kingdom would never be the same. If you're watching from anywhere in the world, drop your city in the comments below, and don't forget to hit that like button and stick around until the end. This story gets wild. Aswan. The iron doors groaned open, and Kaia Thorne was shoved inside. She stumbled forward, bare feet slapping against cold stone. Her wrists were bound in silver cuffs that burned wherever they touched skin. A deliberate cruelty meant to remind her what she was: merchandise, property, a debt payment wrapped in flesh and fear. The claiming hall stank of sweat, smoke, and old blood. Torches lined the walls, their flames casting jittering shadows across the vaulted ceiling. At the far end of the room sat the Alpha King on a throne carved from black stone, his massive frame draped in furs and arrogance. His eyes, pale yellow, lupine even in human form, tracked her like a predator watching prey stumble into a trap. Kaia forced herself to breathe. In, out, don't shake, don't show weakness. Around the hall the court whispered. She caught fragments of their voices, sharp as broken glass. That's Aldrich Thorne's daughter. Sold her to cover his gambling debts. Poor thing doesn't stand a chance. Heard she's damaged goods. Kaia lifted her chin. Let them whisper. Let them judge. She'd been judged her whole life. The guard behind her, a brute with a scarred face and breath that reeked of cheap ale, grabbed her shoulder and forced her to her knees. Pain shot through her legs as bone met stone, but she bit down on the inside of her cheek and refused to cry out. The Alpha King leaned forward, elbows resting on his knees. His lips curled into something that might have been a smile if it hadn't been so cruel. So, he drawled, his voice a low rumble that filled the hall. This is what Aldrich Thorne considers payment. Kaia said nothing. Speaking without permission here was a death sentence. The king rose from his throne, each movement deliberate, predatory. He descended the stone steps slowly, boots echoing in the silence. The crowd parted as he approached, nobles and courtiers shrinking back like rabbits before a wolf. He stopped in front of her, towering. Up close, he was even more terrifying, muscle and malice wrapped in skin that smelled of iron and ash. His hand shot out, fingers gripping her jaw and forcing her head up. Look at me. She did. She met those yellow eyes and refused to flinch, even as her heart hammered so hard she thought it might crack a rib. The king studied her face, turning her head left, then right, like a butcher inspecting a cut of meat. His thumb pressed against her cheekbone, too hard, and she felt the threat in it, the promise that he could crush her skull with barely any effort. Pretty enough, he muttered, though I've had better. Laughter rippled through the court. Kaia's stomach churned, but she kept her expression blank. She'd learned years ago how to hide, how to disappear inside herself when the world became too sharp, too loud, too cruel. The king released her jaw and stepped back, arms crossing over his chest. Your father owes me 3,000 marks. He had until the winter solstice to pay. He failed. Kaia's throat tightened. 3,000 marks. She'd known her father was drowning in debt, but she hadn't known it was that deep, that catastrophic. So he offered you instead, the king continued. A daughter for a debt. How quaint. His gaze slid down her body, lingering in ways that made her skin crawl. Tell me, girl, are you intact? Heat flooded her face. She wanted to spit at him, to scream, to fight. But she was one unarmed woman in a room full of predators. Survival meant swallowing her pride. Yes, she said quietly. Speak up. Yes, she repeated, louder this time. The king's smile widened. Good. I've broken 6 wives, but I prefer them unmarked when I start. He turned to the crowd, addressing them now like this was a performance. The law is clear. A debt unpaid can be settled through servitude or claiming. Aldrich Thorne has chosen claiming. His daughter becomes mine, property of the crown, bound by blood and law. The crowd murmured approval. Kaia's vision blurred at the edges. This was it. This was how her life ended, not with a blade or a noose, but with a crown and a contract. The king gestured to a pale, wiry man in black robes standing near the throne. "Scribe, prepare the binding documents." The scribe nodded and scurried off. Kaia's mind raced. She had one secret left, one last card to play, but it was a card that would get her killed if anyone discovered it. She was hollow, born without a wolf. In this kingdom, that was worse than treason, worse than murder. It was an abomination. The law said every person of age must present their wolf during the first full moon after their 18th year. Kaia had tried. She'd stood in the moonlight surrounded by her father's pack and waited for the shift, waited for the pull, the fire, the transformation everyone else described. Nothing came. No wolf, no beast, just her, alone in her own skin, while the pack stared in horror. Her father had covered it up, bribed the pack witnesses, kept her hidden. But if the king tried to bond with her, if he tried to call her wolf during the claiming rite, she'd be exposed and executed. "Your Majesty." The voice cut through the hall like a blade through silk. Every head turned. A man stepped forward from the shadows near the eastern archway, tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in black leather and steel, with a long coat that brushed the floor as he walked. His hair was dark, almost black, and his eyes, God's. His eyes were the coldest shade of blue Kaia had ever seen, like ice over deep water. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. The Alpha King's expression shifted. The predatory amusement vanished, replaced by something harder, sharper. "Riven," the king said slowly, "I didn't summon you." "No." The man, Riven, agreed. His voice was low, controlled, and utterly devoid of warmth. "You didn't." He stopped a few feet from Kaia, his gaze flicking down to her for just a moment before returning to the king. In that brief glance, she saw nothing. No pity, no lust, no curiosity, just cold assessment. "You're interrupting a legal proceeding," the king said, his tone edged with warning. "I'm aware." Riven's expression didn't change. "I'm also aware that you're about to make a mistake." The hall went silent. The Alpha King's jaw tightened. "Choose your next words carefully, nephew." "Nephew?" Kaia's breath caught. She'd heard rumors of the king's nephew, Prince Riven Calder, the Shadow of the North, the king's enforcer and executioner. They said he was brutal, efficient, that he felt nothing and feared nothing, that he'd killed more men than most soldiers saw in a lifetime, and now he was standing 3 feet away from her. "I invoke the right of prior claim," Riven said. The crowd exploded into whispers. The Alpha King's eyes narrowed. "You what?" "The right of prior claim," Riven repeated, louder this time. "By blood and rank, I claim this woman before the bond is sealed." Kaia's heart stopped. The king stared at him, disbelief warring with fury on his face. "You can't be serious." "I am." "She's a debt payment, a commoner. Why in the frozen hell would you—" "That's my concern," Riven interrupted, "not yours." The king took a step closer, his voice dropping to a dangerous growl. "You think you can walk into my hall and steal what's mine?" "She's not yours yet." Riven's tone remained maddeningly calm. "The binding hasn't been completed. The scribe hasn't even returned with the documents. By law, I have the right to claim her first." The king's hands curled into fists. For a moment, Kaia thought he might attack, that this would end in blood and chaos right here on the stone floor. But then the king exhaled, a sharp, angry sound, and stepped back. "Fine," he said coldly. "Invoke your right. But know this, Riven. If you take her, you take responsibility for Aldrich Thorne's debt as well. 3,000 marks, due by spring." Riven didn't blink. "Agreed." The king's smile was vicious. "Then she's yours, and may you rot with her." He turned and strode back to his throne, his coat snapping behind him like a battle standard. The crowd parted, silent now, watching the prince with wary eyes. Riven looked down at Kaia. "Stand." She tried. Her legs were numb from kneeling, and the silver cuffs had rubbed her wrists raw. She got halfway up before her knees buckled. Riven's hand shot out, gripping her elbow and hauling her upright with effortless strength. His touch was firm, impersonal, cold, like being grabbed by winter itself. "Can you walk?" he asked. "Yes," she managed. "Then walk." He released her and turned toward the exit. Kaia hesitated, glancing back at the Alpha King. He sat on his throne, watching them leave with an expression that promised retribution. She didn't know what she'd just been saved from, or what she'd just been sold into, but she followed the prince anyway, because what other choice did she have? The carriage ride was silent. Kaia sat on one side, hand still bound in silver, while Riven sat across from her, staring out the window at the dark landscape rolling past. The moon was nearly full, casting the snow-covered hills in pale light. She studied him when she thought he wasn't looking. He was younger than she'd expected, maybe late 20s, early 30s at most. Handsome in a brutal, carved-from-stone kind of way. But there was something wrong with him, something off. His skin was too pale, his breathing too shallow. And when the moonlight hit his face just right, she saw faint dark veins tracing up the side of his neck, disappearing beneath his collar. He was sick, or cursed, maybe both. "Why did you do that?" she asked finally, her voice barely audible over the clatter of wheels on frozen ground. Riven didn't look at her. "Do what?" "Claim me. You don't know me. You don't owe me anything." "No," he agreed. "I don't." "Then why?" He was quiet for a long moment. Then he turned his head, those cold blue eyes locking onto hers. "Because you were about to die," he said simply. "And I need a wife who won't ask questions." Kaia's blood went cold. "What?" "You heard me." He leaned back, arms crossing over his chest. "The king would have bonded with you tonight, and when he discovered you have no wolf, he would have executed you in front of the entire court." The world tilted. "How?" Her voice cracked. "How do you know?" "I know a lot of things." His gaze didn't waver. "I also know that you need protection. And I need a marriage that looks legitimate without the complications of a true bond." Her mind spun. "You want a fake marriage?" "I want a useful marriage." He tilted his head slightly. "You keep my secret. I keep yours. We both survive." "And what's your secret?" she asked, though she already suspected the answer. Riven smiled, thin, humorless, and utterly without warmth. "I'm dying," he said. "And if anyone finds out, the king will have me killed before the curse finishes the job." The carriage hit a rut in the road, jolting them both. Kaia gripped the edge of the seat, her heart hammering. "So," Riven continued, his voice still calm, still controlled, "here's the arrangement. You play the part of my devoted wife. You attend the necessary events, smile when required, and keep your mouth shut about what you are. In return, I protect you from the king, from your father, and from anyone else who might try to use you." "And if I refuse?" Kaia asked, though she already knew the answer. "Then I'll return you to the claiming hall." He shrugged. "The king will bond with you, and you'll be dead by morning." Kaia stared at him. This man, this prince, had just saved her life and threatened it in the same breath. He was offering her a cage, but it was a cage with a lock she could see, a cage she might, eventually, escape. "Fine," she said quietly. "I'll do it." Riven nodded once. "Good." He reached into his coat and pulled out a small silver key. Leaning forward, he unlocked the cuffs around her wrists. They fell away, clattering to the floor of the carriage. Kaia rubbed her raw skin, feeling the burn of silver fade slowly. "One more thing," Riven said, his voice dropping lower. "If you try to run, I will find you. If you betray me, I will end you. And if you ever tell anyone what I just told you, I won't," Kaia interrupted. She met his gaze, unflinching. "I know how to keep secrets, Your Highness. I've been keeping them my whole life." Something flickered in his expression, surprise maybe, or respect. It was gone before she could name it. "Then we have an accord." He extended his hand. Kaia hesitated. Then she reached out and clasped it. His grip was cold, firm, final. And in that moment, Kaia Thorne realized she'd just made a deal with the most dangerous man in the kingdom. Riven's estate loomed out of the darkness like a fortress carved from shadow and stone. It wasn't a castle, not in the traditional sense. No soaring towers or gilded gates, just a sprawling, grim structure of black stone and iron, surrounded by high walls and guarded by men who looked like they'd been carved from the same cold rock. The carriage stopped in the courtyard. A servant opened the door, and Riven stepped out first, not bothering to offer Kaia his hand. She climbed down on her own, her legs still shaky from kneeling on stone and riding in silence for hours. The air here was colder, sharper, like the estate itself was rejecting warmth. "This way," Riven said, already walking toward the main entrance. Kaia followed, her bare feet silent on the frozen ground. She was still dressed in the thin, ragged dress her father had forced her into for the claiming, something meant to make her look vulnerable, appealing. It was working, but not in the way he'd intended. She was freezing. Inside, the estate was just as cold as the exterior. Stone floors, high ceilings, minimal decoration. It felt less like a home and more like a mausoleum. A woman appeared from a side corridor, older, gray-haired, with sharp eyes and a sharper expression. She looked Kaia up and down with the kind of disdain reserved for stray dogs. "This is her?" the woman asked Riven. "Yes." He didn't slow his stride. "Prepare the east wing. She'll stay there." "The east wing?" The woman's eyebrows shot up. "But that's—" "I know what it is," Riven cut her off. "Do it anyway." The woman's mouth pressed into a thin line, but she nodded. "As you wish, my lord." Riven stopped at the base of a grand staircase and finally turned to look at Kaia. "Mrs. Halwyn will show you to your rooms," he said. "You'll find clothes, food, and anything else you need. Stay in the east wing. Don't wander. Don't talk to the other staff unless necessary. And if anyone asks who you are, I'm your wife," Kaia finished. "Claimed wife," he corrected. "The binding ceremony will happen in 3 days. Until then, you're a guest." "A prisoner, you mean?" His expression didn't change. "Call it whatever you like." He turned and walked away, disappearing down a darkened hallway without another word. Kaia stood there, staring after him, feeling the weight of her new reality settle over her like a shroud. "Come along, girl," Mrs. Halwyn said curtly. "I don't have all night." Kaia followed the older woman up the staircase, through a maze of cold corridors, until they reached a heavy wooden door. Mrs. Halwyn pushed it open, revealing a surprisingly large suite of rooms, bedroom, sitting area, even a private bathing chamber. "These will be yours," Mrs. Halwyn said. "The prince has requested that you remain here until further notice." "Requested?" Kaia echoed. "Or ordered?" Mrs. Halwyn's lips twitched, almost a smile, but not quite. "You're sharp. Good. You'll need that here." She gestured to a wardrobe in the corner. "There are clothes inside, plain but clean. Food will be brought at dawn, midday, and dusk. If you need anything else, ring the bell." She pointed to a small brass bell on the bedside table. "And if I need to leave?" Kaia asked. "You don't." Mrs. Halwyn's tone left no room for argument. "The east wing is sealed after dark. The doors lock from the outside." Of course they did. "Anything else I should know?" Kaia asked dryly. Mrs. Halwyn studied her for a long moment. Then she stepped closer, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "The prince is dying," she said. "Everyone in this house knows it, even if they don't say it aloud. Whatever bargain you've made with him, whatever role you're playing, don't get attached. He won't last the year." Kaia's chest tightened. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you look like someone who might actually care," Mrs. Halwyn said. "And caring in this house will get you killed." With that, she turned and left, the door clicking shut behind her. Kaia stood alone in the silence, her heart pounding. She walked to the window and looked out over the estate grounds. Snow stretched endlessly in every direction, broken only by the dark silhouette of the outer walls. She was trapped. Again. But this time, at least, she had a chance. A small, fragile, desperate chance. And Kaia Thorne had built her entire life on chances just like that. The first 3 days passed like a fever dream. Kaia barely saw Riven. He appeared once, briefly, on the second morning, standing in the doorway of her sitting room like a ghost made solid, pale, and silent. He'd handed her a folded piece of parchment with the binding ceremony details, told her to memorize them, and left before she could ask a single question. Mrs. Halwyn brought food 3 times a day, always at exact intervals, always with the same tight-lipped expression. The clothes in the wardrobe fit well enough. Simple dresses in dark colors, nothing fancy, nothing that screamed prince's wife. Kaia suspected that was intentional. She spent most of her time at the window watching the estate grounds. Guards patrolled the walls in shifts. Servants moved through the courtyard like ants following invisible trails. And beyond the gates, the wilderness stretched endlessly, forests and frozen hills that promised death to anyone foolish enough to run. Not that she was planning to run. Not yet. On the third night, Mrs. Halwyn arrived with a different dress, deep burgundy, fitted at the waist, with long sleeves and a neckline that didn't plunge but didn't hide either. It was the kind of dress meant to make a statement without screaming for attention. "The ceremony is in an hour," Mrs. Halwyn said, laying the dress across the bed. "You'll need to bathe and dress quickly." Kaia looked at the dress, then at the older woman. "What happens during the ceremony?" "You stand. You speak the words. You don't faint." Mrs. Halwyn's tone was clipped, efficient. "The prince will handle the rest." "That's not an answer," Mrs. Halwyn sighed. "It's a simplified binding. No blood exchange, no wolf bonding, just vows and witnesses. The king's court will attend, so you'll need to look the part, calm, composed, like you actually want this." Kaia's stomach twisted. "And if I can't, then you'd better learn to lie convincingly in the next hour." Mrs. Halwyn turned toward the door. "The bathwater is ready. Don't be late." She left. Kaia stood alone, staring at the dress. Her hands were shaking. She curled them into fists, nails biting into her palms until the shaking stopped. Then she bathed, dressed, and prepared to marry a dying man she barely knew. The ceremony took place in the estate's great hall, a cavernous space with vaulted ceilings and walls lined with weapons from wars Kaia had only heard about in stories. Torches burned in iron sconces, casting flickering light across the assembled crowd. And what a crowd it was! Nobles from the king's court filled the benches, dressed in furs and silks, their faces painted with curiosity and thinly veiled disdain. Kaia recognized a few from the claiming hall, the same ones who'd whispered about her, judged her, watched her kneel before the Alpha King like she was livestock. They were watching her now, too. Riven stood at the front of the hall beside an altar draped in black cloth. He wore formal attire, dark leather and steel, with a long coat that made him look even taller, even colder. His expression was unreadable, but Kaia caught the faint tremor in his hands before he clasped them behind his back. He was getting worse. A man in ceremonial robes, some kind of officiant, stood beside the altar, holding a leather-bound book. He looked ancient, his face a map of wrinkles and scars, his eyes rheumy but sharp. Kaia walked down the aisle alone. No father to give her away. No family to witness. Just her, the dress, and the weight of 100 judgmental stares. She reached the altar and stopped beside Riven. He didn't look at her, didn't acknowledge her, just kept his gaze fixed straight ahead, jaw tight. The officiant cleared his throat. "We are gathered," he began, his voice thin and reedy, "to witness the binding of Prince Riven Calder and Kaia Thorne, as sanctioned by law and blood." Someone in the crowd coughed, a wet, mocking sound. Laughter rippled through the benches. Kaia's face burned, but she kept her expression neutral. Riven still didn't move. The officiant continued reciting the traditional vows, words about loyalty, duty, shared burdens. Kaia barely heard them. Her pulse was too loud in her ears, drowning everything else out. "Prince Riven," the officiant said, turning to him, "do you accept this woman as your bound partner, to protect and provide for, until death claims one or both?" Riven's voice was flat, emotionless. "I do." The officiant turned to Kaia. "Kaia Thorne, do you accept this man as your bound partner, to honor and uphold, until death claims one or both?" Her throat was dry. She swallowed hard. "I do." The officiant nodded. "Then by the laws of this kingdom and the authority vested in me, I declare you bound. May your union bring strength to this house." He closed the book with a snap. That was it. No kiss, no grand gesture, just words and witnesses and the cold clinical finality of a contract sealed. The crowd erupted into polite applause, hollow, obligatory. Kaia felt like she'd just signed her own death warrant in front of an audience that couldn't wait to watch her hang. Riven turned and walked toward a side exit without a word. Kaia hesitated, then followed, acutely aware of every eye on her back. The reception was worse. It was held in an adjoining hall, smaller but no less cold, with tables laden with food and drink that no one seemed particularly interested in eating. The nobles clustered in groups, their voices rising and falling in waves of gossip and speculation. Kaia stood near the wall, holding a glass of wine she hadn't touched, watching the room like a prey animal, watching predators circle. Riven had disappeared almost immediately after entering, leaving her alone. Mrs. Halwyn had warned her this might happen, that he rarely engaged at social functions, that his reputation as the Shadow of the North meant people gave him space. But that left Kaia exposed. A woman approached, tall, blonde, draped in emerald silk that probably cost more than Kaia's father's entire debt. Her smile was sharp, predatory. "So," the woman said, her voice dripping with false sweetness, "you're the new princess." Kaia met her gaze. "I am." "How quaint." The woman's eyes traveled down Kaia's dress and back up, lingering just long enough to make it uncomfortable. "I'm Lady Saris Vile. I knew Prince Riven quite well before his recent troubles." Translation: "I slept with him, and you're beneath me." Kaia took a sip of wine to keep from responding immediately. "How nice for you." Lady Saris's smile didn't waver. "Tell me, dear, how does it feel to be married to a dying man? I imagine it's rather like being a widow before you're even properly a wife." The words hit like a slap, but Kaia forced herself to stay calm. "I imagine it feels better than being so desperate for relevance that you corner strangers at parties." Lady Saris's expression flickered, just for a second, before the mask snapped back into place. "Careful, girl. You may have a title now, but titles don't protect you from everything." "Neither does expensive silk," Kaia said softly. "But it's a nice try." Lady Saris's smile turned vicious. She leaned in close, her voice dropping to a whisper. "You think you're clever, but everyone here knows what you are. A debt payment, a placeholder, and the moment Riven dies, you'll be nothing again." She straightened, her smile bright and false once more. "Enjoy the party, princess." She swept away, leaving Kaia standing alone, heart pounding, hands trembling around the wine glass. A voice spoke from behind her. "She's not wrong, you know." Kaia turned. A man stood there, lean, dark-haired, with a scar running from his temple to his jaw. He wore simple clothing, not noble finery, and his eyes were sharp, assessing. "Who are you?" Kaia asked. "Corvan?" He tilted his head slightly. "I run security for the prince, and you're making enemies faster than I expected." "I didn't start that conversation." "No," Corvan agreed, "but you didn't walk away from it either." He glanced around the room, then back at her. "Word of advice. People here don't care about fairness or truth. They care about power. And right now, you have none." "Thanks for the pep talk," Kaia muttered. Corvan's lips twitched, almost a smile. "I'm not here to coddle you. I'm here to tell you the rules. Rule 1, don't trust anyone in this room. Rule 2, don't give them ammunition. Rule 3, if you're going to survive here, you need allies, and you don't have any yet. And you're offering to be one?" Kaia asked skeptically. "No." He shook his head. "I'm offering information. What you do with it is up to you." Before Kaia could respond, a commotion erupted near the main doors. The crowd parted, and the Alpha King strode into the hall. The temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. He wore black and gold, his crown a brutal thing of twisted metal and sharp edges. His yellow eyes scanned the room until they landed on Kaia. He smiled. Kaia's blood turned to ice. The king crossed the hall in long, deliberate strides, nobles scrambling out of his way. He stopped in front of Kaia, towering over her, his presence suffocating. "Princess," he said, the title dripping with mockery. "How lovely to see you again." Kaia's throat was tight, but she forced herself to speak. "Your Majesty, I trust my nephew is treating you well?" The king's gaze slid past her, searching. "Where's Riven, by the way? I'd hate to think he's neglecting his new bride already." "He's attending to estate matters," Kaia said, the lie coming easier than she expected. The king's smile widened. "Of course he is. Always so dutiful." He leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a whisper only she could hear. "Tell me, girl, has he bedded you yet?" Heat flooded Kaia's face. She wanted to step back, to run, but her feet were rooted to the floor. That's none of your concern, she managed. The king laughed, a low, cruel sound. Oh, but it is. You see, a binding isn't truly sealed until it's consummated. And if it's not sealed... He let the sentence hang, the threat clear. Kaia's heart hammered. The law doesn't require. The law requires what I say it requires, the king interrupted. And I say that if Revan doesn't consummate this binding within the lunar cycle, it's void, which means you revert to unclaimed status. His smile turned vicious, which means you're mine again. He straightened, his voice returning to normal volume. Just thought you should know. Enjoy the rest of your evening, princess. He turned and walked away, leaving Kaia standing there, shaking, the room spinning around her. Corvin was still beside her. Breathe, he said quietly. Kaia sucked in air, her lungs burning. Did he just... Yes. Corvin's expression was grim. The king just declared that your binding is conditional. And he's right. If it's not consummated within a lunar cycle, he can challenge it. Can Riven... Kaia couldn't finish the sentence. No. Corvin's voice was flat. The prince is too weak. The curse is eating him alive. If he tries to bond physically, it could kill him. Kaia's vision blurred. So I'm trapped. Yes, Corvin said. But you're not helpless, not yet. What the hell does that mean? Corvin glanced around, then leaned in. It means you need to find a way to survive this that doesn't rely on the prince, because he won't be around much longer, and when he's gone, the vultures will circle. He walked away, disappearing into the crowd. Kaia stood alone, surrounded by enemies, bound to a dying man, and trapped in a game she didn't know how to play. But she'd survived worse. She'd survived her father, survived the claiming hall, survived being hollow in a world that would kill her for it. She could survive this too. Kaia didn't see Riven again until well past midnight. She'd retreated to her rooms in the East Wing, unable to stomach another second of false smiles and veiled threats. Mrs. Halwyn had brought her a tray of food she couldn't eat, then left her alone. Kaia paced the sitting room, her mind racing. The king's threat echoed in her skull. If it's not consummated, you're mine again. She couldn't let that happen. Wouldn't. But how could she consummate a binding with a man who could barely stand upright? A knock at the door startled her out of her thoughts. Come in, she called. The door opened and Riven stepped inside. He looked worse than he had at the ceremony. His skin was gray, his eyes sunken. The dark veins on his neck had spread, creeping up toward his jaw. He moved stiffly, like every step hurt. We need to talk, he said. Kaia crossed her arms. I'd say so. Your uncle just told me our binding is void unless we consummate it within a lunar cycle. Riven's jaw tightened. I know. You know? Kaia's voice rose. And you didn't think to mention this before we went through with the ceremony? It wouldn't have changed anything, Riven said quietly. You needed protection. I needed a wife. The consummation clause is a complication. A complication? Kaia laughed, sharp, bitter. That's one word for it. Riven crossed to the window, staring out at the darkness. The king is testing me. He knows I'm weak. He's trying to force my hand. And what happens when he succeeds? Kaia demanded. When the lunar cycle ends and we haven't... She couldn't say it. Then the binding is void, Riven said. And you go back to the claiming hall. Kaia's stomach dropped. So we're both dead. Yes. The simple, brutal honesty of it hit her like a punch. There has to be another way, she said. Riven turned to face her. There isn't. Then we fake it, Kaia said quickly. We tell the king we've consummated. Who's going to check? He will. Riven's voice was flat. He'll demand proof, a witness, a bloodied sheet, something. Kaia's face burned. That's barbaric. That's the law. She wanted to scream, to throw something, to tear the room apart. Instead, she took a breath and forced herself to think. What if... She hesitated. What if we actually do it? Riven went very still. What? I'm not saying... Kaia's face was on fire now. I'm not saying we need to, I mean, there are ways to make it look real without... She stopped, frustrated. We just need evidence. Blood. That's it. Riven stared at her. You're suggesting we stage a consummation. I'm suggesting we survive, Kaia shot back. Unless you have a better idea. He was silent for a long moment. Then he exhaled, slow and controlled. It might work, but it's risky. If the king suspects— He already suspects, Kaia interrupted. He's watching us, waiting for us to fail, so we don't give him the satisfaction. Riven studied her, those cold blue eyes searching her face. You're braver than I thought. I'm desperate, Kaia corrected. There's a difference. A faint, humorless smile touched his lips. Fair enough. He crossed to the door, then paused, his hand on the handle. We'll do it tomorrow night. I'll arrange for witnesses, people loyal to me, not the king, and we'll make sure the evidence is convincing. And then? Kaia asked. And then we hope it's enough to keep the vultures at bay. He opened the door. Get some sleep, Kaia. You're going to need it. He left. Kaia sank onto the edge of the bed, her hands trembling. Tomorrow night. She had one day to prepare for the most dangerous performance of her life. And if she failed, the Alpha King would make sure she never got a second chance. The next day crawled by like a wounded animal. Kaia tried to distract herself, reading books from the estate library, pacing the grounds under Corvon's watchful eye, anything to keep her mind off what was coming. It didn't work. By the time the sun set, her nerves were strung so tight she thought they might snap. Mrs. Halwyn arrived just after dusk, carrying a bundle of white linen and a small glass vial. The prince sent these, she said, her tone brisk. She set them on the bed. The linen is for evidence. The vial contains animal blood. It'll pass inspection. Kaia stared at the items. He thought of everything. He's thorough when he needs to be. Mrs. Halwyn's expression softened just slightly. For what it's worth, girl, you're handling this better than most would. I don't feel like I'm handling anything, Kaia admitted. That's how you know you're doing it right. Mrs. Halwyn turned to leave, then paused. One more thing. The witnesses will arrive in an hour. They'll wait outside the door. When it's done, you call for them. They inspect the sheet. You act embarrassed but composed. Understood? Kaia nodded, her throat tight. Good. Mrs. Halwyn left. Kaia sat on the bed, staring at the vial of blood, and wondered how her life had come to this. Riven arrived exactly 1 hour later. He looked even worse than the night before. The dark veins had spread to his cheekbones now, and his breathing was labored. He carried himself like a man walking to his own execution. Are you ready? He asked. Kaia stood. As ready as I'll ever be. He nodded. The witnesses are outside. Corvon and Mrs. Halwyn. They're loyal. They won't speak unless spoken to. And what do we do? Kaia asked. Riven crossed to the bed and picked up the vial. We make noise. Enough to be convincing. Then we use this. He held up the vial. And we call them in. That's it? That's it. Kaia's heart was pounding so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. Okay, let's do it. Riven set the vial down and turned to face her. For the first time since she'd met him, she saw something other than cold calculation in his eyes. Fear. He was terrified. Riven, she said quietly. We don't have to— Yes, he interrupted. We do. He crossed to the door and locked it. Then he turned back to her, his expression hardening into something unreadable. Make it convincing, he said. And then he knocked over a chair. The crash was loud, sudden. Kaia jumped, her pulse spiking. Riven moved to the other side of the room, breathing hard, not from exertion, but from pain. He braced himself against the wall, and Kaia saw his hand shaking. She understood what he needed her to do. She let out a gasp, sharp, breathy, then another, and another. Riven's breathing grew louder, rougher. Kaia grabbed the bedpost and let out a soft cry, the sound halfway between pleasure and pain. It felt absurd, humiliating, but she kept going. Riven knocked over a small table. The sound of wood hitting stone echoed through the room. Kaia cried out again, louder this time. They kept it up for what felt like an eternity, but was probably only minutes. Then Riven staggered to the bed, grabbed the vial, and spilled the blood across the white linen. It spread in a dark, damning stain. He stepped back, his chest heaving. "Call them." Kaia crossed to the door on shaking legs and knocked. "We're done." The door opened. Corvin and Mrs. Halwyn stepped inside, their expressions carefully neutral. Mrs. Halwyn crossed to the bed and inspected the sheet. She nodded once. "It's sufficient." Corvin glanced at Riven, then at Kaia. "The king's messenger will be here tomorrow to verify. You'll both need to be present." "Understood," Riven said. The two of them left, closing the door behind them. Kaia and Riven stood in silence, the weight of what they'd just done settling over them like a burial shroud. "We did it," Kaia said finally. "We survived," Riven corrected. "For now." He moved toward the door, but before he reached it, he stumbled. His knees buckled, and he collapsed. Kaia lunged forward, catching him before he hit the floor. His weight was dead, heavy. His skin was ice cold. "Riven!" His eyes rolled back. The dark veins pulsed, spreading faster now, crawling across his face like living shadows. The curse was consuming him, and Kaia realized, with a cold, sinking dread, that their charade had just bought them time they might not have. Kaia's arms burned under Riven's weight, but she refused to let him fall. "Corvan!" she screamed, her voice raw. "Mrs. Halwyn! Someone help!" The door burst open. Corvin appeared first, his eyes widening at the sight of Riven crumpled on the floor, veins crawling across his face like black lightning. "Get him to the bed!" Corvin ordered, moving fast. He grabbed Riven under the arms while Kaia supported his legs. Together they hauled him onto the mattress, the same one still stained with false blood, the evidence of their lie now soaked with the sweat of a dying man. Mrs. Halwyn rushed in with a basin of water and strips of cloth. "How long has he been like this?" "Just now," Kaia said, her voice shaking. "He collapsed right after you left." Mrs. Halwyn pressed a damp cloth to Riven's forehead. His skin was gray, lips tinged blue. The veins pulsed beneath the surface like something alive was burrowing through him. "The curse is accelerating," Corvin muttered. He looked at Kaia, his expression grim. "This happens sometimes. Stress triggers it, makes it worse." Kaia's stomach dropped. "The ceremony, the charade, we pushed him too hard." "He pushed himself," Corvin corrected. "He knew the risk." Riven's eyes snapped open, wild, unfocused. He gasped, his back arching off the bed. His hand shot out and grabbed Kaia's wrist, grip like iron. "Get out," he rasped. "All of you, get out!" "We're not leaving you," Kaia said. "You don't understand." His voice broke into a strangled sound, half growl, half scream. "It's fighting me. If I lose control—" The temperature in the room plummeted. Frost crept across the windows in jagged patterns. Kaia's breath misted in front of her face. The torches flickered and dimmed. "What's happening?" she whispered. "The curse," Mrs. Halwyn said, backing toward the door. "It's ice magic. Old, forbidden. It kills the wolf first, then the host." Riven convulsed. Ice spread from his hands, creeping across the bedsheets in crystalline fingers. Kaia tried to pull away, but his grip tightened. "Riven, let go." "Can't." His eyes locked onto hers, pupils blown wide. "Can't stop it." The ice reached her skin. Pain shot up her arm, sharp, burning cold. She cried out, trying to wrench free, but he held on like she was the only thing keeping him anchored. Corvin grabbed a poker from the fireplace and smashed it against Riven's wrist. The blow broke his grip. Kaia stumbled back, clutching her arm. The skin was white, frost-burned, already blistering. Riven screamed. The sound was inhuman. Agony and fury twisted together. Ice erupted from his body in jagged spikes, tearing through the mattress, the bed frame, the floor. The windows shattered. Freezing wind howled into the room. "Everyone out!" Corvin roared. "Now!" Mrs. Halwyn bolted. Corvin grabbed Kaia and hauled her toward the door. She fought him, her eyes on Riven. "We can't leave him. He'll kill you if you stay." Corvin shoved her into the hallway and slammed the door. Ice immediately sealed it shut, frost spreading across the wood like a living thing. Inside the room, Riven's screams faded into silence. Kaia stood there, shaking, her burned arm throbbing. The hallway was freezing now, the cold seeping through the walls. "What do we do?" she whispered. Corvin's jaw was tight. "We wait. Either the curse burns itself out, or it kills him." That's it? We just wait? Unless you have a better idea. Kaia stared at the frozen door. Beyond it, the man who'd saved her, who'd given her a chance, however fragile, was dying. And she was powerless to stop it, but that didn't mean she had to accept it. By dawn, the screaming had stopped. Kaia hadn't slept. She'd paced the hallway for hours, ignoring Mrs. Halwyn's attempts to bandage her arm, ignoring Corvan's orders to rest. She stayed near the door, listening to the sounds beyond. Ice cracking, Riven's ragged breathing, the occasional crash of furniture breaking. When silence finally came, it was worse than the noise. Corvan tested the door. The ice had receded, leaving the wood scorched and brittle. He pushed it open slowly. The room was a wasteland. The bed was destroyed, reduced to splinters and shredded fabric. The walls were scarred with frost burns. The windows were gone, just gaping holes letting in the bitter morning wind. And in the center of it all, Riven lay on the floor, motionless. Kaia rushed past Corvan and dropped to her knees beside him. Riven! He was alive, barely. His chest rose and fell in shallow, uneven breaths. The veins had receded slightly, but they were still there, dark and angry beneath his skin. Help me move him, she said. Corvan hesitated. Kaia, I don't care what he is. Help me! Together they carried him to a guest room down the hall. Mrs. Halwyn brought fresh linens and water. They cleaned him up, dressed him in dry clothes, and covered him with blankets that did nothing to warm his ice-cold skin. Kaia sat beside the bed, her burned arm forgotten, watching him breathe. You should rest, Mrs. Halwyn said gently. I'm fine. You're not. The older woman's voice was firm, but not unkind. You've been through hell. You need sleep, food, medicine for that burn. I said I'm fine, Mrs. Halwyn sighed. She set a tray on the bedside table, bread, cheese, water, and left without another word. Kaia stared at the food. She couldn't eat, couldn't think about anything except the fact that Riven had almost died last night, that he was still dying, that the curse inside him was a ticking clock she couldn't see but could feel with every shallow breath he took. Why did you do it? She whispered, though she knew he couldn't hear her. Why did you save me? You don't even know me. No answer, just the quiet rasp of his breathing. Kaia leaned back in the chair and closed her eyes. Exhaustion pulled at her, dragging her down into uneasy sleep. She dreamed of ice and screaming, of her father's face twisted with disgust, of the Alpha King's yellow eyes watching her from the shadows, waiting for her to fail. When she woke, it was afternoon, and someone was knocking at the door. The king's messenger arrived with an entourage. Kaia met them in the main hall, flanked by Corvan and Mrs. Halwyn. Her arm was bandaged now, hidden beneath long sleeves, but every movement sent fresh pain shooting through her. The messenger was a weasel of a man, thin and sharp-featured, with eyes that darted around the room like he was cataloging every detail for a report. Princess Kaia, he said, bowing just enough to be polite but not respectful. I've been sent by His Majesty to verify the consummation of your binding. Kaia's stomach twisted, but she kept her expression neutral. Of course. The messenger's gaze flicked to Corvan. Where's Prince Riven? Indisposed, Corvan said smoothly. The prince is recovering from an illness. He sends his regrets. The messenger's eyes narrowed. How convenient. The prince's health is not a matter of convenience, Kaia said, her voice sharp. It's a private matter. Nothing is private when the king demands answers. The messenger stepped closer. I require proof of consummation, the sheet, as per tradition. Mrs. Halwyn stepped forward, holding the blood-stained linen from the night before. The messenger took it, examining the stain with a scrutiny that made Kaia's skin crawl. This appears adequate, he said slowly, though I must say the prince's absence raises questions. The prince fulfilled his duty, Kaia said. That should be sufficient. The messenger folded the linen and handed it back to Mrs. Halwyn. His Majesty will decide what is sufficient. He turned toward the door, then paused. One more thing, Princess. His Majesty requests your presence at court in 3 days' time. Alone. Kaia's blood ran cold. Why? He wishes to inspect his newest subject. The messenger's smile was oily. Ensure you're settling into your role appropriately. Translation: the king wants to humiliate you in front of the entire court. Possibly worse. I'll be there, Kaia said, because refusing wasn't an option. The messenger bowed again and left, his entourage trailing behind him like vultures. The moment the doors closed, Kaia's knees buckled. Corvin caught her before she hit the floor. 3 days, she whispered. He's giving me 3 days. To do what? Corvin asked. To prove I'm worth keeping alive. Kaia straightened, forcing steel into her spine. Or to give him an excuse to kill me. Raven woke that night. Kaia was dozing in the chair beside his bed when she heard him stir. Her eyes snapped open. He was sitting up, slow and stiff, one hand pressed to his chest like he was trying to hold himself together. You're awake, she said. He looked at her, his expression unreadable. You stayed. Where else would I go? He didn't answer. His gaze dropped to her bandaged arm. Did I do that? It doesn't matter. It does. Bish. His voice was rough, edged with something that might have been guilt. I could have killed you. But you didn't, Kaia leaned forward. Raven, the king summoned me. In 3 days I have to appear at court. Alone. His jaw tightened. He's testing you. I know. Kaia swallowed hard. What happens if I fail? He'll find a reason to void the binding, claim you're unfit, and then… Raven didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. Kaia's hands curled into fists. There has to be a way to stop him. There isn't. Raven's voice was flat, final. The king doesn't lose. Not to people like us. Then I'll cheat, Kaia said. Raven looked at her sharply. What? I'll give him what he wants. Proof that I'm loyal, that I'm not a threat. She stood, pacing. He wants to inspect me? Fine. I'll pass inspection. But I need to know what he's looking for. Raven watched her, something shifting in his expression. He'll try to force your wolf. If you can't shift, he'll know you're hollow, and he'll execute you on the spot. Kaia's chest tightened. So I need a wolf. You can't just… Raven stopped, his eyes widened slightly. You're serious. Do I have a choice? Kaia shot back. Either I find a way to fake it, or I die. So yes, I'm serious. Raven was silent for a long moment. Then he swung his legs over the side of the bed, moving slowly, painfully. There might be a way, but it's dangerous, and it involves magic the kingdom has outlawed for centuries. Tell me. He met her gaze. There's a woman, a witch. She lives in the Blackwood, beyond the northern border. She's old, powerful. If anyone can help you, it's her. Kaia's pulse quickened. And you think she'll help me? No, Raven said bluntly. But she might if you offer her the right price. What kind of price? The kind that costs more than money. Raven stood, swaying slightly. Blood, secrets, pieces of yourself you can't get back. Kaia's throat was dry. When do we leave? We don't. Raven's voice was firm. I can't make the journey. The curse… He gestured vaguely at himself. I'm barely standing. You'll have to go alone. Alone? Kaia's voice rose. Into cursed woods to find a witch who might kill me on sight? Yes. She wanted to scream, to throw something, to demand he come up with a better plan. But there wasn't one. Fine, she said. I'll go. Raven crossed to a desk in the corner and pulled out a map, spreading it across the surface. He pointed to a dark patch of forest north of the estate. The Blackwood. Her cabin is here, near the heart. Follow the old hunting trail. Don't stray from the path. And whatever you do, don't make deals you can't keep. Kaia studied the map. The Blackwood looked vast, tangled, the kind of place where people went to disappear. What's her name? She asked. Raven hesitated. Morgan. The name sent a chill down Kaia's spine. She'd heard it before, in whispered stories her father used to tell when he was drunk. Morgan the Bloodright. Morgan the Cursed. Morgan who built monsters from pain and bone. You're sending me to a nightmare, Kaia said quietly. I'm sending you to the only person who might save your life, Raven corrected. The choice is yours. Kaia looked at the map, at the dark forest, at the impossible task ahead. Then she looked at Riven, pale, dying, still standing because he refused to fall. "I'll leave at first light," she said. The Blackwood was worse than she'd imagined. Kaia rode alone, on a horse Corvon had saddled for her before dawn. He'd also given her a blade, a pack of supplies, and a warning. "If you're not back in 2 days, I'm coming after you." She'd nodded, mounted the horse, and ridden north. The forest loomed ahead like a wall of shadow. The trees were ancient, gnarled, their branches twisted into shapes that looked almost deliberate, almost malicious. Kaia found the old hunting trail and followed it, her horse's hooves muffled by layers of dead leaves. The deeper she went, the quieter it became. No birds, no wind, just silence, thick and oppressive. After an hour, she found the cabin. It sat in a small clearing, half hidden by moss and vines. Smoke curled from the chimney. The windows glowed faintly, like eyes watching her approach. Kaia dismounted and tied the horse to a tree. Her hand went to the blade at her hip, fingers curling around the hilt. She knocked on the door. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the door swung open. The woman standing in the doorway was not what Kaia expected. She was young, maybe 30, maybe ageless, with dark hair streaked with silver and eyes the color of winter storms. She wore simple clothes, stained with what looked like old blood. "You're Aldrich Thorne's daughter," the woman said. Not a question, a fact. Kaia's breath caught. "How did you—" "I can smell him on you." Morgan's gaze traveled down Kaia's body and back up. Desperation, lies, fear, you reek of it. Kaia forced herself to stay calm. "I need your help." Morgan laughed, sharp, bitter. "Of course you do. Everyone who comes here needs something." She stepped aside. "Come in then. Let's see what you're willing to pay." Kaia hesitated, then crossed the threshold. The cabin was small, cluttered with jars and bundles of herbs and things Kaia didn't want to identify. A fire burned in the hearth, casting flickering shadows across the walls. Morgan closed the door and turned to face her. "You want a wolf." Kaia's heart stuttered. "Yes. You were born hollow, a flaw, an abomination." Morgan circled her slowly, like a predator sizing up prey. "And now you need to pass as whole, or the king will kill you." How do you know all this?" "Because I know everything that happens in this cursed kingdom." Morgan stopped in front of her. "I know about the prince. I know about the curse. I even know about the blood-stained sheet." Her smile was cruel. "You're a terrible liar, girl, but you're brave. I'll give you that." Kaia's hands trembled. "Can you help me or not?" Morgan studied her for a long moment. Then she crossed to a shelf and pulled down a small wooden box. She opened it, revealing a vial of dark liquid and a silver needle. "I can give you a wolf," Morgan said, "but it won't be real. It'll be a shadow, a ghost, just enough to fool the king's inspection." "What's the cost?" Kaia asked. Morgan's smile widened. "Your blood and a promise." "What kind of promise?" "When the time comes, you'll do something for me, something important, and you won't ask questions." Kaia's stomach churned. "That's vague." "That's the deal." Morgan set the box on the table. "Take it or leave it." Kaia stared at the vial, at the needle, at the woman who held her survival in her hands. She thought of the king's yellow eyes, of Riven dying in a frozen room, of the life she'd never had and the future she might never see. "I'll take it," she said. Morgan's smile turned sharp. "Good. Hold out your hand." Kaia did. Morgan took the needle and pricked her finger, letting a single drop of blood fall into the vial. The liquid inside hissed and turned black. "Drink this," Morgan said, handing her the vial. "All of it. And don't stop, no matter how much it hurts." Kaia lifted the vial to her lips. The liquid smelled like iron and rot. She hesitated. "Now, girl, or the deal is void." Kaia drank. The pain was immediate. It felt like swallowing fire and ice at the same time, like her insides were being torn apart and stitched back together. She gasped, doubling over, the vial slipping from her fingers and shattering on the floor. Morgan watched, unmoved. Kaia's vision blurred. She felt something inside her shift, crack, break open. And then, a presence. Not a wolf. Not fully. but something close, a shadow of one, flickering at the edges of her consciousness. She straightened, breathing hard. It worked. Of course it worked. Morgan crossed her arms. But remember, girl, it's not real. It's a mask. And masks crack under pressure. Kaia wiped her mouth with the back of her hand. How long will it last? Long enough. Morgan tilted her head. Now go. Before I change my mind and take more than blood. Kaia stumbled toward the door. Her body felt wrong, like it didn't quite fit anymore. But she was alive. And she had what she needed. She mounted her horse and rode back through the forest, the shadow wolf stirring inside her like a restless ghost. The king's court was a spectacle of cruelty dressed as ceremony. Kaia stood in the center of the grand hall, surrounded by nobles who watched her like hawks circling a dying animal. The Alpha King sat on his throne, his yellow eyes fixed on her with predatory interest. Princess Kaia, he said, his voice echoing. How kind of you to join us. Kaia kept her chin up. You summoned me, Your Majesty. I came. So you did. The king leaned forward. Tell me, how is my dear nephew? Still clinging to life, I hope. The crowd tittered. Prince Ryvan is recovering, Kaia said evenly. Recovering. The king's smile was vicious. How optimistic. But we're not here to discuss my nephew's failing health. We're here to discuss you. He rose from the throne and descended the steps, each movement deliberate. The crowd parted. Kaia's pulse hammered, but she held her ground. The king stopped in front of her. There have been questions about your binding, doubts about its legitimacy. The consummation was verified, Kaia said. Oh, I'm sure it was. The king's gaze raked over her. But consummation is only part of it. A true binding requires a wolf bond. And I've heard rumors, princess, that you lack such a bond. The hall went silent. Kaia's heart stopped. Someone had talked. Someone had betrayed her. I don't know what you've heard, she said carefully, but I assure you. Prove it, the king interrupted. Shift. Right here. Right now. Show us your wolf. The crowd murmured, excitement rippling through them like wildfire. Kaia's mind raced. This was it. The moment everything hinged on. She closed her eyes and reached for the shadow wolf Morgan had given her. It stirred, sluggish and cold, but it was there. She pulled. Pain lanced through her body, sharp, brutal. Her bones shifted, her skin burned. The world tilted. And then, fur, claws, a snarl building in her throat. When she opened her eyes, she was on all fours. The court gasped. Kaia had shifted. Not fully. The wolf was wrong, translucent in places, more shadow than substance. But it was enough. The king's expression darkened. Interesting. Kaia shifted back, her human form snapping into place with a painful jolt. She stood, breathing hard, every muscle screaming. Satisfied? She asked. The king circled her slowly. You have a wolf. I'll grant you that. But it's weak, incomplete. He stopped in front of her, leaning close. Tell me, princess, are you carrying something that doesn't belong to you? Kaia's blood turned to ice. No, he couldn't know. But as his words sank in, she felt it, a presence inside her. Not the shadow wolf, something else, something small, something growing. She was pregnant. The realization hit her like a physical blow. Her vision swam. She stumbled, catching herself on a nearby pillar. The king smiled. Ah, so you didn't know. He turned to the court. It seems our dear princess is with child. How fortuitous! The crowd erupted into whispers. Kaia's mind reeled. Pregnant. But how? The consummation had been fake, unless it hadn't been. Unless something else had happened. Unless the curse, the magic, the desperation had created something impossible. The king's voice cut through her thoughts. A child conceived in a binding is sacred, protected, which means, princess, you've just become far more valuable than you were this morning. He leaned in, his voice dropping to a whisper only she could hear. And far more dangerous. He straightened and addressed the court. The binding stands. Princess Kaia is under crown protection until the child is born. After that, he smiled. We'll see. He turned and walked back to his throne. leaving Kaia standing alone, the weight of 1,000 stares crushing her. She'd survived the inspection, but she'd just discovered a truth that changed everything. And as she stumbled out of the hall, barely able to breathe, one thought screamed through her mind. I have to tell Riven. She found him in his study, hunched over a desk, looking worse than ever. Riven, she gasped, closing the door behind her. We need to talk. He looked up. How did it go? I'm pregnant. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Riven went very still. What? I don't know how, but I am. Kaia crossed to him, her voice shaking. The king knows. The whole court knows. And now I'm protected until the child is born, but after that you're expendable. Riven's voice was hollow, and so is the child. Kaia sank into a chair, her legs giving out. How did this happen? We didn't... The curse, Riven said quietly. Magic like that? It doesn't follow rules. It creates, destroys, twists things. He looked at her, and for the first time she saw something other than cold calculation in his eyes. Fear, and something else. Love. Kaia, he said, his voice cracking. The moment he said it, everything exploded. Ice erupted from his body in a violent wave, slamming into the walls, the ceiling, the floor. Kaia screamed, scrambling back. Riven convulsed, the dark veins spreading across his entire body now, pulsing with black light. No, he gasped. Not now. The curse roared to life, triggered by the confession he'd just made. And Kaia realized with cold, sinking horror that loving her was killing him. The ice spread faster than thought. Kaia threw herself backward as jagged spikes erupted from the floor where she'd been standing. The study transformed into a frozen hellscape in seconds. Walls coated in frost, furniture shattered by crystalline growths, the air so cold it burned her lungs. Riven was on his knees, hands clawing at his chest like he could rip the curse out with his bare fingers. The veins had consumed him now, black lines spreading across every visible inch of skin, pulsing with a sickly light that made Kaia's eyes water. Riven! She scrambled toward him, but another wave of ice forced her back. Fight it! Can't! His voice was barely human, distorted by pain and something else, something ancient and wrong. You need to run. I'm not leaving you. His head snapped up, and for a moment his eyes were completely black. I'm not asking. The door burst open. Corvan rushed in, took one look at the frozen carnage, and grabbed Kaia by the arm. Out. Now. No, he'll kill you if you stay. Corvan hauled her toward the door as another explosion of ice shattered the desk behind them. This is what happened to his last... He stopped himself, but Kaia heard the unfinished sentence loud and clear. This is what happened to his last wife. They stumbled into the hallway. Corvan slammed the door and immediately started dragging furniture in front of it. Chairs, a table, anything heavy enough to slow down whatever was happening inside. What do you mean his last wife? Kaia demanded, her voice shaking. Corvan shot her a look. You didn't know? Know what? He finished barricading the door and turned to face her, his expression grim. Riven was married before 3 years ago, woman named Isla. Beautiful, kind. Everything he wasn't. He paused. The curse took her. He loved her, and it killed her. Kaia's blood turned to ice. The curse kills people he loves? Not people. Just the person he bonds with. Corvan's voice was flat, clinical. The curse was designed that way. Old magic. Someone wanted to make sure he'd never have an heir, never find peace. The moment he feels anything real, the curse activates. And it doesn't stop until... A scream tore through the door. Not Riven's voice, something else, something inhuman. Kaia's hand shook. How do we stop it? We don't. Corvan started backing down the hallway. We evacuate the wing and hope it burns itself out before he destroys half the estate. That's your plan? Hope? Unless you have a better one. I do. Kaia's voice was steady, even though her insides were screaming. I need to see Morrigan again. Corvan stared at her. The witch? Are you insane? She gave me the shadow wolf. Maybe she knows how to stop the curse. And maybe she'll kill you for asking. Then I'll die trying. Kaia met his gaze. But I won't stand here and watch him suffer. Behind them, the barricaded door cracked. Frost seeped through the gaps. Corvin swore under his breath. Fine, but I'm coming with you. No, you need to protect the estate. Keep everyone away from that wing. Kaia was already moving toward the stairs. I'll be back before sunrise. And if you're not? She didn't answer. She just ran. The horse nearly threw her twice on the way to the Blackwood. The animal could sense something wrong. Maybe the panic radiating off Kaia. Maybe something else. By the time they reached the forest, both of them were lathered in sweat despite the freezing air. Kaia tied the horse and plunged into the trees, not bothering with the trail this time. She didn't have time for caution. The cabin appeared faster than it should have, like it had moved closer to meet her. Morgan was waiting on the porch, arms crossed, a knowing smile on her face. Back so soon, the witch said. I thought you'd last at least a week before coming crawling back. Kaia didn't have patience for games. The curse, the one killing Riven. How do I stop it? Morgan's smile widened. You don't. There has to be a way. There isn't. Morgan descended the porch steps slowly. That curse was crafted by one of the most powerful witches who ever lived. It's not meant to be broken. It's meant to punish. Punish who? Kaia demanded. Riven didn't do anything. Not him. Morgan's eyes glinted. His bloodline. The Calder family built their power on the backs of witches like me, burned us, hunted us, used our magic, and then tried to erase us from history. She circled Kaia like a predator. The curse was revenge, a gift that keeps on giving, generation after generation. Kaia's mind raced. Who cast it? Morgan's smile turned sharp. Does it matter? Yes. The witch studied her for a long moment. Then she laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. Fine. You want the truth? The witch who created that curse was named Alara Thorn. The world tilted. Thorn, Kaia whispered. That's your bloodline. Morgan's expression was triumphant. Alara was your great-great-grandmother. She was Riven's ancestor's mistress, cast aside when she became inconvenient. So she cursed his entire line, made sure no Calder would ever know true love without it destroying them. Kaia's legs gave out. She hit the ground hard, her mind reeling. That's why I was born hollow. The magic skipped you, or maybe it didn't. Morgan crouched beside her. Maybe being hollow was the magic protecting itself, making sure you'd survive long enough to finish what Alara started. I don't want to finish anything, Kaia said through gritted teeth. I want to save him. Then you're a fool. Morgan stood. The curse can't be broken by wishing it away. It requires a sacrifice. Blood for blood, magic for magic. What kind of sacrifice? Morgan's smile was cold, the kind that costs everything. Kaia looked up at her. Tell me. The witch studied her for a long moment. Then she sighed, like she was disappointed Kaia had asked. To break the curse, you need to return what was taken. Alara cursed the Calders because they stole her power, her dignity, her future. To undo that, someone from her bloodline, someone like you, would have to give those things back. How? By offering your life in place of his. Morgan's voice was matter-of-fact. Your blood carries the same magic that created the curse. If you willingly sacrifice yourself, the curse recognizes the debt is paid. Riven lives. You don't. Kaia's throat was tight. There's no other way. None that I know of. Morgan turned back toward the cabin. But I'll give you this for free, girl. Death isn't the worst thing that can happen to someone. Living with regret is. She disappeared inside, leaving Kaia alone in the clearing. Kaia sat there, the weight of the truth crushing her. She could save Riven, but it would cost her everything, her life, her future, the child growing inside her. The child. Her hand went to her stomach, pressing against the barely there swell. She was carrying something impossible, something born from magic and desperation, and a bond that shouldn't exist. If she died, so did the baby. But if she didn't, Riven would die, and the curse would spread, consuming him piece by piece until there was nothing left. She closed her eyes and made her choice. By the time Kaia returned to the estate, the sun was beginning to rise. The east wing was a disaster, Windows blown out, walls cracked, ice coating everything in a thick, deadly layer. Servants huddled in the courtyard, whispering nervously. Corvin stood near the entrance, his face grim. "Is he alive?" Kaia asked. "Barely," Corvin gestured toward the wing. "The curse stopped spreading an hour ago. He's unconscious now. Mrs. Halwyn is with him." Kaia nodded and started toward the wing. "Kaia." Corvin's voice stopped her. "Whatever you're planning, I know what I'm doing," she lied. She found Riven in a guest room, pale and still beneath layers of blankets. Mrs. Halwyn sat beside him, her expression weary. "How is he?" Kaia asked. "Alive," Mrs. Halwyn said. "For now." Kaia pulled up a chair and sat. She took Riven's hand, cold, too cold, and held it between hers. "I'm sorry," she whispered, "for all of this." Mrs. Halwyn looked at her sharply. "What are you planning?" "Nothing." Kaia forced a smile. "Just sitting with him." The older woman didn't look convinced, but she didn't press. After a few minutes, she left, closing the door softly behind her. Kaia waited until the footsteps faded. Then she stood and walked to the window, staring out at the frozen landscape. She thought about her father, about the claiming hall, about every moment in her life where she'd been told she was worthless, broken, wrong. Maybe she was. Maybe being hollow meant she'd always been meant for this, a tool, a key, a sacrifice. But if that was true, then she'd make it count. She turned back to Riven, still unconscious, still dying. "I'm going to fix this," she said quietly, "even if it kills me." She left the room and went to find Corvin. He was in the armory sharpening a blade. He looked up when she entered. "I need you to do something for me," Kaia said. "What?" "I need to see my father." Corvin's eyebrows shot up. "Your father? The man who sold you?" "Yes." Kaia's voice was steel. "I need answers, and he's the only one who can give them to me." Corvin studied her. "This is about the curse. It's about everything." Kaia met his gaze. "Will you help me or not?" He sighed. "You're going to get yourself killed." "Probably," Kaia smiled grimly. "But not before I get what I need." Aldrich Thorne lived in a ramshackle house on the edge of the kingdom, far from the capital, far from anyone who mattered. Kaia hadn't seen it in years, but it looked exactly the same. Broken shutters, sagging roof, the stench of cheap liquor seeping through the walls. Corvin had agreed to accompany her, though he'd made it clear he thought this was a terrible idea. They rode in silence, arriving just before midday. Kaia dismounted and walked to the door. She didn't knock. She kicked it open. Her father was inside, slumped in a chair, a bottle in his hand. He looked up, bleary-eyed, and his face twisted into something between surprise and disgust. "Well," he slurred, "look who came crawling back." Kaia stepped inside. "I need information." Aldrich laughed, wet, phlegmy. "Information? What makes you think I have anything worth knowing?" "Because you're a liar and a coward, but you're not stupid." Kaia crossed the room and stood over him. "You knew what I was. You knew I was hollow, but you covered it up. Why?" Aldrich took a long drink from the bottle. "Why do you think? To save my own skin." "No." Kaia's voice was cold. "You could have killed me, dumped me in the woods. No one would have cared, but you didn't. You kept me alive. Why?" Her father's eyes flickered, just for a second. But it was enough. "You knew something," Kaia pressed, "about the magic, about our bloodline. What was it?" "I don't know what you're talking about." "Ilara Thorne." Kaia's voice cut through his denial like a blade. "Our ancestor, the witch who cursed the Calders. What did you know about her?" Aldrich went very still. Then he laughed again, but this time it sounded forced. "So you found out. Took you long enough. Tell me." He set the bottle down, his hands shaking. "Ilara was powerful. More powerful than anyone in our family, before or since. But she was also broken. The Calders used her, threw her away, and she lost everything. Her magic, her child, her mind." He looked up at Kaia. "The curse she made wasn't just revenge. It was a puzzle. A test." "A test for what?" "To see if anyone from her bloodline would be strong enough to undo it." Aldrich's smile was bitter. "She wanted one of her descendants to finish what she started. to prove that love could break what hate had built. Kaia's heart pounded. How? By choosing it. Aldrich leaned back. The curse feeds on love that's forced, stolen, broken. But if someone offers love freely, without expectation, without fear, he shrugged. The magic doesn't know what to do with that. It breaks. Kaia's mind raced. That's why I was born hollow. Not to punish me, to prepare me. Maybe. Aldrich's expression was unreadable. Or maybe you're just broken like the rest of us. Kaia turned and walked toward the door. Where are you going? Her father called after her. To finish what Alara started, Kaia said, and to prove you wrong. She left him there, drunk and alone, and rode back to the estate with a plan forming in her mind. Riven woke 2 days later. Kaia was there when his eyes opened, sitting beside the bed, her hand in his. You're still here, he said, his voice hoarse. Where else would I be? He tried to sit up, but she pressed him back down gently. Don't. You're still weak. The curse. I know. Kaia's voice was steady. I know what it is. I know what it does. And I know how to stop it. Riven's eyes widened. Kaia, if you're thinking of sacrificing yourself, I'm not. She squeezed his hand. Not the way you think. She told him everything. About Alara, about the bloodline, about the choice that could break the curse. Love freely given, she said, without fear, without expectation. That's the key. Riven stared at her. You think you can love me enough to break a centuries-old curse? I think I already do, Kaia said quietly. And I think you love me too. That's why the curse is fighting so hard. His jaw tightened. If you're wrong, then we die. Kaia's smile was small, sad. But at least we'll die trying. Riven was silent for a long moment. Then he pulled her closer, his forehead resting against hers. I don't deserve you, he whispered. No one deserves anyone, Kaia said. But we choose each other anyway. She kissed him. It wasn't gentle, it wasn't perfect, but it was real. And the moment their lips met, something inside the curse cracked. The veins on Riven's skin flickered. The ice in the room began to melt. The cold that had plagued him for years started to recede. Kaia pulled back, breathless. It's working. Riven's eyes were wide, disbelieving. How? Because we chose this, Kaia said. No one forced us. No one manipulated us. We chose each other, knowing the cost. And the curse can't survive that. The black veins pulsed once more, then began to fade, retreating beneath his skin like shadows fleeing from light. Riven gasped, his hand going to his chest. I can feel it. The curse. It's letting go. Kaia watched as color returned to his face, as the darkness that had consumed him slowly ebbed away. It wasn't instant. It wasn't easy. But with every breath, he looked more alive. And for the first time since she'd met him, Riven called her smiled. Not a cold, calculated smile. Not a bitter, humorless one. A real smile. Full of hope and relief and something Kaia had never seen in him before. Joy. We did it, he said, his voice breaking. We actually did it. Kaia laughed, tears streaming down her face. Yeah, we did. He pulled her into his arms, holding her like she was the only thing keeping him tethered to the world. And maybe she was, but she was done being hollow. Done being a tool, a pawn, a sacrifice. She was Kaia Thorne, and she'd just broken a curse that had destroyed generations. Now she just had to make sure the Alpha King didn't destroy her for it. The summons came 3 days later. The king demanded Riven's presence at court. Immediately. Kaia stood beside Riven in the great hall, her heart pounding. The nobles whispered as they entered, their eyes sharp, predatory. The Alpha King sat on his throne, his expression unreadable. Nephew, he said, you look better. I am, Riven said evenly. The king's eyes narrowed. How interesting. I was under the impression your condition was terminal. It was. Riven's voice was calm. Until it wasn't. The king leaned forward. And how exactly did you achieve this miraculous recovery? Riven glanced at Kaia. Then he looked back at the king. Love, he said simply. The court erupted into laughter. The king's smile was vicious. Love. How quaint. He stood descending the steps slowly. Tell me, nephew, do you expect me to believe that sentiment cured a curse designed to kill your entire bloodline? I expect you to believe the evidence, Riven said. I'm standing here, alive. The curse is broken. The king stopped in front of him. Broken or dormant? Broken. The king's gaze shifted to Kaia. And you, the little hollow girl who should have died in the claiming hall, you expect me to believe you broke a centuries-old curse with nothing but good intentions? Kaia met his gaze, unflinching. I don't expect you to believe anything, Your Majesty. I just expect you to accept the truth. The king's smile faded. The truth. The truth is that you're a threat, both of you. And threats are dealt with, Riven finished. I know. But here's another truth. If you kill us, the kingdom will know why. They'll know about the curse, about Alara Thorn, about how the Calder family built its power on stolen magic. The king's expression darkened. You wouldn't dare. Try me. The two men stared at each other, the tension so thick it was suffocating. Finally, the king stepped back. You've won this round, nephew, but don't think for a second that this is over. He turned and walked back to his throne. Court is dismissed. The nobles filed out, whispering furiously. Kaia and Riven stood alone in the hall, victorious but exhausted. We should go, Riven said quietly. Kaia nodded, but as they turned to leave, she felt it, a shift in the air, a sense that something fundamental had changed. The king was still dangerous, still powerful, but for the first time, Kaia wasn't afraid of him, because she'd proven something more important than survival. She'd proven that love, real, freely given, fearless love, could break anything. Even curses built on centuries of hate. They didn't make it out of the capital before the first attack came. Kaia and Riven were halfway through the market district, their carriage rattling over cobblestones, when arrows punched through the wooden sides. One whistled past Kaia's ear so close she felt the wind of it. Down! Riven shoved her to the floor as another volley slammed into the carriage. The driver screamed. The horses panicked, bolting forward. Corvan, riding alongside, wheeled his mount around. Ambush! Northeast rooftop! Riven kicked open the carriage door. How many? 6, no, 8! Corvan's blade was already out. King's men, they're not even hiding the uniforms. Kaia's heart hammered. The king hadn't wasted time. He'd moved the moment they left the palace, sending assassins dressed as soldiers to finish what the curse couldn't. We need to move, Riven said. He grabbed Kaia's hand and pulled her toward the door. Jump on 3. Are you insane? We're moving. 2. Another arrow punched through where Kaia's head had been seconds ago. 3. They jumped. Kaia hit the cobblestones hard, rolling to absorb the impact. Pain shot through her shoulder, but she forced herself up. Riven landed beside her, already moving, pulling her toward an alley. Behind them, the carriage crashed into a market stall, splintering wood and scattering fruit across the street. The horses screamed, tangled in their traces. Corvan appeared at the alley entrance, blood streaking his face. This way, there's a safe house 2 blocks north. They ran. Footsteps pounded behind them. Soldiers, at least a dozen, maybe more. Kaia's lungs burned. Her legs felt like lead. The baby, she couldn't think about the baby right now, couldn't think about what running like this might do. She just had to survive the next 60 seconds. Corvan led them through a maze of back streets, over walls, through a tannery that stank of death and chemicals. Finally, he shoved open an unmarked door and pulled them inside. The safe house was small, dark, and smelled like mildew, but it was empty. For now. Riven slammed the door and barred it. How long do we have? Minutes, maybe less. Corvan was already moving toward the back, checking windows. The king's not playing games anymore. He wants you dead. Both of us, Kaia corrected, catching her breath. He wants both of us dead. Riven looked at her, his expression grim. He can't afford to let us live. Not after what happened in court. If word spreads that the curse was broken, it exposes him, Kaia finished. Exposes the whole Calder legacy, all the lies they built their power on. Corvan reappeared from the back room. There's a tunnel, old smuggling route. It comes out near the northern gate. And then what? Kaia asked. We run? Hide? The king controls the kingdom. There's nowhere we can go that he won't find us. Then we don't run, Riven said quietly. Both Corvin and Kaia stared at him. What are you suggesting? Corvan asked. Riven's jaw tightened. We go back. Tonight. And we finish this. That's suicide, Corvin said flatly. It's the only option. Riven crossed to the window, looking out at the city. The king moved against us because he's afraid, which means we have leverage. We just need to use it. Kaia's mind raced. The court, the nobles, they saw you healthy, saw the curse was broken. Some of them have to be asking questions. Exactly. Riven turned to face them. The king's power is built on fear and secrecy. If we expose what he's hiding, the curse, the stolen magic, everything, we split his support, turn the court against him. And how do we do that? Corvin asked. Walk back into the palace and announce it? He'll have our heads before we finish the first sentence. Not if we have proof, Kaia said slowly. An idea was forming, dangerous and desperate. Morrigan, the witch, she knows the history. She could testify. A witch's word means nothing in court, Corvin interrupted. They'd execute her on sight. Not if she brings evidence. Kaia's pulse quickened. Records, documents, something that proves the Calders used blood magic to build their power. Riven's eyes narrowed. You think she has that? I think she knows where to find it. Kaia looked at both of them. Alara Thorne didn't just curse the Calders. She documented everything, her journals, her research. It's out there somewhere. And if anyone knows where, it's Morrigan. Silence. Then Riven nodded. It's a long shot. It's the only shot we have, Kaia said. Corvin swore under his breath. You're both insane, but fine. I'll hold the tunnel. Buy you time to reach the Blackwood. You're not coming? Kaia asked. Someone needs to spread the word. Plant seeds of doubt. Corvin's smile was grim. I know people in the capital, loyal to Riven, not the king. If I can get them talking, questioning, it'll help when you make your move. Riven gripped his shoulder. Be careful. You too. Corvin's gaze shifted to Kaia. Both of you. They used the tunnel. It was narrow, wet, and smelled like a tomb, but it got them out of the city. By the time they emerged near the northern gate, night had fallen. Guards patrolled the walls, but they were watching for people trying to get in, not out. Kaia and Riven slipped past them like ghosts. They stole horses from a farm an hour north and rode hard for the Blackwood. The forest loomed ahead, darker than the night around it, like it was made of concentrated shadow. Kaia's body ached. Her arm throbbed where she'd hit the cobblestones. But she pushed through, focusing on the rhythm of the horse beneath her, the sound of Riven riding beside her. They reached the cabin just before dawn. Morrigan was waiting on the porch again, like she'd known they were coming. You're persistent, the witch said. I'll give you that. Kaia dismounted, swaying slightly. We need your help. Again? Morrigan's eyebrows rose. What is it this time? Another shadow wolf? A love potion? Maybe a curse of your own? Documents, Riven said, stepping forward. Records proving the Calders stole magic from Alara Thorne. We need proof we can bring before the court. Morrigan's smile faded. You want to expose them. We want to survive, Kaia corrected. And the only way to do that is to destroy the king's credibility. The witch studied them both. Then she turned and walked into the cabin. Come inside, both of you. They followed. Morrigan crossed to a bookshelf in the corner and pulled down a leather-bound box. She set it on the table and opened it, revealing stacks of yellowed parchment, letters, and what looked like journal pages. Alara's records, Morrigan said. Everything she wrote about the Calders, their crimes, their betrayals, the magic they stole and the lives they destroyed to get it. Kaia reached for the papers, but Morrigan's hand shot out, stopping her. These aren't free, the witch said. We already paid you, Kaia said. You paid for the Shadow Wolf. This is different. Morrigan's gaze was sharp. These documents are the last pieces of Alara's legacy. If I give them to you, I'm trusting you to use them wisely, to honor what she fought for. We will, Riven said. Will you? Morrigan looked at him. Because using these means declaring war on the king. It means risking everything, your lives, your child, your future. Are you ready for that? Kaia and Riven exchanged a glance. Then Kaia looked back at Morrigan. Yes. The witch held her gaze for a long moment. Then she released the papers. Then take them, and may your courage be stronger than your enemy's fear. They rode back toward the capital with the documents secured in a leather satchel. The sun was rising, painting the sky in shades of blood and gold. This is going to work, Kaia said, though she wasn't sure if she was trying to convince Riven or herself. It has to, Riven replied, because if it doesn't, we're both dead. They reached the city by midday. Corvin met them at a tavern on the outskirts, his face grim. The kings announced a trial, he said, without preamble. Tomorrow at noon. You're both accused of treason, conspiracy, and practicing dark magic. Kaia's stomach dropped. He's forcing our hand. He's trying to execute us before we can expose him, Riven corrected. He looked at Corvin. Did you spread the rumors? As many as I could. Corvin nodded. Half the court is whispering about the curse, about how you survived. Some are starting to ask questions. Good. Riven set the satchel on the table. Then we give them answers. The trial was held in the Great Hall, packed with nobles, soldiers, and commoners who'd been granted entry to watch the spectacle. The Alpha King sat on his throne, flanked by his advisors, his expression carved from stone. Kaia and Riven stood in the center of the hall, hands bound in silver, guards on all sides. The charges were read aloud: treason, conspiracy, the use of forbidden magic. Each one carried a death sentence. When the scribe finished, the king leaned forward. How do you plead? Riven's voice rang out, clear and strong. Not guilty, and I have evidence to prove it. The hall erupted into whispers. The king's eyes narrowed. Evidence? Yes. Riven nodded to Corvin, who stepped forward with the satchel. He opened it and pulled out the documents, holding them up for the court to see. These are the personal records of Ilara Thorn, a witch who lived 300 years ago. They detail how the Calder family, your ancestors, your majesty, used stolen blood magic to seize power. The whispers grew louder. The king's face darkened. This is absurd. You expect the court to believe the ravings of a long-dead witch? I expect them to believe the truth, Riven said. He gestured to Corvin, who began reading from one of the letters. It was damning. Ilara's words painted a picture of betrayal, theft, and murder. How she'd been used by Riven's ancestor, how her magic had been stolen, how she'd been cast aside and left to die, and how, in her final act, she'd cursed the entire bloodline to suffer as she had. The court listened in stunned silence. When Corvin finished, Riven spoke again. The curse that's plagued my family for generations, the one that killed my first wife, the one that nearly killed me. It was born from this betrayal. And the only reason I'm standing here now is because it was broken. Not by more stolen magic, but by love freely given. He looked at Kaia. By someone who chose to save me, even when it meant risking everything. The king stood, his voice thunderous. Enough! This is a fabrication, a desperate attempt to... To what? Kaia's voice cut through his. She stepped forward, her bound hands raised. To tell the truth? To expose the lies your family built its power on? The king's gaze locked onto hers. You dare. I dare, Kaia said, because I'm done being afraid of you. She turned to address the court. I was born hollow, a girl without a wolf. In this kingdom, that's a death sentence, but I survived. I survived my father selling me. I survived the claiming hall. I survived a marriage to a cursed man. And I survived you trying to kill me. Her voice grew stronger. The king wants you to believe I'm a threat, that we're criminals. But the real threat is a ruler who builds his throne on stolen magic and lies, who kills anyone who challenges him, who's so afraid of the truth that he'd rather execute his own nephew than admit his family's crimes. The hall was silent now, every eye on her. The king's face was twisted with rage. Guards! Wait! The voice came from the crowd. An older nobleman stepped forward, Lord Hafren, one of the king's advisors. Your Majesty, perhaps we should examine these documents more closely. If there's even a chance they're authentic. They're lies, the king snarled. Then prove it, another voice called out. Lady Saris, the woman who'd confronted Kaia at the reception, stepped forward. Her expression was calculating. Let the court scholars examine them. If they're forgeries, it'll be obvious. Other nobles murmured agreement. The king looked around the hall, and for the first time Kaia saw something in his eyes that wasn't rage or arrogance. Fear. He'd lost control of the narrative. And he knew it. Fine, he said through gritted teeth. Examine the documents. But until then, these two remain under guard. He gestured sharply, and the guards moved to take Kaia and Riven away. But before they could, a commotion erupted at the hall's entrance. The doors burst open, and a figure stumbled in, bloodied, gasping, barely able to stand. Aldrich Thorne. Kaia's father collapsed to his knees in the center of the hall. His clothes were torn, his face bruised. He looked half dead. "I have something to say," he rasped. The king's expression darkened. "Who is this?" "Aldrich Thorne," Riven said, "Kaia's father." Aldrich looked up, his gaze finding Kaia. For a moment, something passed between them. Regret, maybe, or recognition. Then he turned to the court. "Everything they said is true. Alara Thorne was my ancestor, and the curse, it's real. I've known about it my whole life." The hall erupted. "I covered up my daughter's condition," Aldrich continued, his voice growing stronger. "Kept her alive because I knew. I knew she might be the one to break it. Alara's journals said someone from her bloodline would have the power, if they were strong enough, if they loved without fear." He looked at Kaia again. "I didn't believe it. I thought she was just broken, worthless. But I was wrong." Kaia's throat tightened. "She's not hollow," Aldrich said. "She's the key, the one Alara left behind to undo what was done. And she did it. She broke the curse, which means everything the king's family built on stolen magic, it's unraveling." The king rose from his throne, his face contorted with fury. "Silence him!" But the guards didn't move. They were staring at Aldrich, at Kaia, at the documents Corvon still held. Lord Haffron stepped forward. "Your Majesty, in light of this testimony, I move that the charges be dismissed pending a full investigation." Other nobles voiced agreement. The king's hands curled into fists. "This is treason." "No," Riven said quietly. "This is justice." The two men locked eyes, and in that moment, the king knew he'd lost. The investigation took 3 days. Scholars examined Alara's documents. Witnesses were called. Aldrich testified again, providing details only someone with direct knowledge of the bloodline could know. By the end, the evidence was undeniable. The Calder family had built its power on stolen magic. The curse was real, and Kaia had broken it. The king was given a choice: abdicate voluntarily or face a public trial that would destroy his family's legacy forever. He chose abdication. The crown passed to Riven by right of blood. And on a cold spring morning, in the same hall where Kaia had once been dragged in chains, Riven Calder was crowned king. Kaia stood beside him, no longer a debt payment or a placeholder. A queen. The ceremony was quiet, witnessed by a smaller court. Nobles who'd supported them, commoners who'd heard the story and come to see the girl who'd broken a curse. When the crown was placed on Riven's head, he turned to Kaia and took her hand. "None of this would have happened without you," he said quietly. "We did it together," Kaia corrected. He smiled, a real smile, full of warmth. "Yes, we did." The kingdom didn't transform overnight. There were still those loyal to the old king, still whispers of discontent. But slowly, things began to change. Laws were rewritten. The persecution of those born hollow or different was outlawed. Magic, once forbidden, was studied and regulated instead of feared. And Kaia, who'd spent her whole life being told she was worthless, became the symbol of something new. Courage, choice. The belief that strength wasn't defined by blood or beasts, but by the will to survive and the courage to love without fear. 4 months after the coronation, Kaia gave birth. The labor was brutal, hours of pain that left her shaking and exhausted. But when the midwife finally placed the baby in her arms, all of it faded. A girl. Tiny, perfect, with a shock of dark hair and eyes that hadn't yet decided what color they'd be. Riven sat beside his bed, his hand on Kaia's shoulder, staring at their daughter with something close to awe. "What do we call her?" he asked. Kaia looked down at the baby, this impossible thing they'd created. Ilara, she said softly, after the woman who made all of this possible. Ryven nodded. Ilara. The baby yawned, tiny fingers curling around Kaia's thumb. And in that moment, Kaia realized something she'd never quite believed before. She wasn't hollow. She'd never been hollow. She'd been waiting, preparing, becoming exactly who she needed to be to survive the impossible and rewrite the future. Years later, when Ilara was old enough to ask questions, Kaia told her the story. Not the sanitized version, not the fairy tale. The real story. The one with blood and fear and desperate choices. The one where love wasn't easy or perfect, but it was strong enough to break curses built on centuries of hate. So what's the moral? Ilara asked, curled up beside her mother in the library. Kaia thought about it, about the claiming hall, about silver chains and frozen rooms and a witch in the woods who'd given her a chance. The moral, she said finally, is that you're never as powerless as people tell you, and love, real love, is the most dangerous magic of all. Ilara grinned. I like that. Kaia smiled and pulled her daughter close. Outside the window, snow was beginning to fall, but inside the fire burned warm, and the future stretched out before them, uncertain, challenging, but theirs to shape. Kaia Thorne had been sold to settle a debt. She'd been called hollow, worthless, broken. But she'd survived. She'd fought. She'd loved without fear. And in the end, she'd become a queen. Not because of blood or birth or destiny, but because she'd chosen to be. And that made all the difference.